Good evening. I'm Socrates, Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. We believe digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global. Shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Good evening. And welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the Deep South. We've been seen all over the world in more than 139 countries. You can find us on YouTube, and if you do, you can go on and hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you as a new subscriber. We're in the middle of a subscription campaign, and it's going really well. I want to send a shout out to our producer and engineer, Chelsea, and also to Lisa over in Dallas, Texas, that's handling all of our social media and our reels and our clips and our shorts. I want to also thank the staff that includes Wildman Brown, doing an outstanding job as an intern from Jackson State University. Not only is he learning, but he's teaching us as well, a distinguished and an accomplished DJ here in the local area. You know, I can't say enough about Curtis Williams, a young man that just showed up one day and said, I really think I can help. And he's done an outstanding job with doing just that. And, you know, people come and they share their talents with us all of the time. Nothing new about that. You know, Chris Young, a young man that came in and did the same thing, said, I think that I see your vision. I see where you're trying to go. I think I can help you get there. And he spends his time with us and donates his time. He writes for the Mississippi Link, and he also has a show here called Sizzling Mississippi. And so I can't say enough about Curtis and the job that he's doing as well. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and family. You know, tag us and share this program. It's critically important that we do that. Now, if you're watching us on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com, you will see a host of categories that you can choose to entertain yourself with. Categories like sports and hot topics and inspiration, which is our religious channel. And if you scroll down further, you'll find the internet radio station where we're broadcasting live 24 hours a day. We carry the Tavis Smiley Show 3 hours a day from 1 to 4. You're welcome to join us there. If you will go to Live 365 and download the app and search the We Believe Radio, then you'll have us at your fingertips. You can also access us by our website, WeBelieveDigital.com. Just scroll down and hit the play button on the radio. And you'll also be listening to the best music that you ever wanted to hear. So we're stretching out. You know, we are looking at venues. Last night we had our first comedy show, which was outstanding. I won't try to call all of the cast name, but you'll be hearing more about that. But the leader of that group was Big Mike. Had an opportunity to have a good lunch over at Mike's Place off of Northview Drive in Jackson, Mississippi. And I know they're having some great events coming up over there on the 20th and 21st. I think the young lady Felicia is having her birthday party over there on the 20th, and she's going to do Harlem Nights as the themes. And I can't wait to dress up and have my big hat on and my suits on that, you know, old school. Well, the jacket is going to be down to my knees. I'm going to have my little 22 snug right up under my arm, and they want me to call me Suge Knight. And so we're gonna have a great time over there. And then the following day, Mike's gonna have another event. So we also did some filming down at Hal and Mal's recently with our new team here that is branching out. And so we look to cover the things in the community that's important to you. You know, it's critically important that we do that because no one else is going to tell our story. And that's what has happened to us much too often is others have told our story. And that's how we got these names, Smith and Johnson and Williams and Thompsons and Garrett and Hendersons. That's how we got those names. You know, it's nowhere in our lineage that we find that name. You know, it was something that was given to us when we was brought over here and transformed into a new man. My co-host, Dr. Henderson, who is with me this evening, as always, has always talked about this new man. Where did he come from, and how did he get created, and what does he look like, and how does he think? And so we're going to deal with that, and we're going to teach a little bit. We're going to teach a little history. While it's banned from Mississippi schools, they can't teach it. You know, we teach it here at We Believe Digital, and we look forward to that. Dr. Henderson, it's always good to have you in the studio, sir.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be back, sir. Every week I see you and learn from you, and that's my job.
Doc, you're not only learning from me, but you're teaching. You're teaching the world, and you're one of the most renowned speakers, one of the most sought-after speakers in this entire country. And I know that you are engaged in delivering keynote speeches and messages to churches and schools and community organizations. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and where you're going with this thing.
Well, I'm going worldwide with what I do. I always talk about the 5 areas of activities that black people must control from birth to death if they want to be considered a real man, a real person, and not what I call property that belong to Europeans throughout the world.
Hold up, Doc. You're trying to tell me that I was property that was owned by white folks?
And still is, yes, most certainly.
I'm not property, Doc.
Well, I know
if I am, maybe I don't know it.
Yeah, that's the problem. A lot of black people don't know it. They want to think they are independent, real Americans that's supported and endorsed by the Constitution and the laws of the United States. You are not. You were excluded from that when they wrote it, and you were still excluded. And every 10 years, they will pretend they're going to pass a law to give you a little more strength, and then they're not going to enforce that.
Doc, the Constitution was written by the founding fathers to guarantee the rights of every human being. Is that not true?
That is totally untrue. You must haven't read the Constitution. I've read it many times, and for years, the Constitution was designed and controlled for the interests of white males only, white European males, and it excluded their mothers, their wives, and all their female children. Only for white males, initially, white males with property. Even the other whites couldn't vote or participate in government.
Only white males that were property owners
would have the power and the leadership positions in the so-called New World that they alleged to have discovered.
They discovered the land that the Native Americans occupied.
That's right. And they had language, governments, had schools, they had agricultural activities going on, and they were not starving to death. They had all the food they could want. All they had to go out there is catch it. So they had everything they needed here.
You're talking about the Native Americans.
That's right.
And they didn't take more than they needed.
That's exactly
as I understand. Now, Doc, you talk about the Constitution, and we here in America, you know, we rely on government and the framework of government and democracy. You know, the American dream is that you can be all that you want to be. Whatever you want to be in America, you can be that. You can dream of that if you were lucky enough to be born in America. Is that not true?
That's not true. Now, there are a few that would be able to escape that. if you are of a certain color, you can escape almost anything, and the European culture will allow one or two people in the so-called color scheme to do something strong politically, economically, and maybe socially, and especially if it has to do with entertainment. Now, you can get to the top of that. But it comes to make a decision where you're going to have to spend somebody's tax money, you are going to be excluded from that. I guarantee you.
Now, Doc, the one or two that escapes are then put in front of the rest of the blacks and say that, they were able to pull themselves up out their bootstraps and they worked hard and they were able to achieve. What's wrong with the rest of y'all?
Well, they didn't work hard and pull up by their bootstraps. In most cases, they were supported by the same people that put them in power, that helped them get to those top positions in football, basketball, and other areas of responsibility. Now, they might have not, as you know, if you look at their histories, most of them were not excellent students. They didn't get to those college and universities on scholarships like you did when you went to your college. They were good basketball or football players or whatever, and they got those social promotions. They always had a C or higher or a D plus, and they were able to go to all the colleges and schools in America that wanted them.
Well, Doc, what happened to Rodney King's plea back in Los Angeles after the riots in L.A. when he got beat down? Most young folk today don't even know who Rodney King is. They don't know what happened to him. But somehow he got saved after the beatdown. They almost killed him. But then he made a passionate plea to, why can't we all just get along?
Well, that's what you're supposed to do when you have a good lawyer. You get whipped and abused, almost killed by certain people, and your lawyer tell you, now, you have to be a good boy now, because I'm on your side, we're going to get you some money. So you can't be aggressive anymore. That's why they were whipping you. So you were trying to get up and shield yourself from being beaten, and that made you look like you were an aggressor. So you have to go now and say, ask forgiveness and say, why we all can't get along, boss, because I'm going to be getting me a few $1,000. It didn't last in 30 days, so to speak.
Now, all white people are not bad.
No, not all.
Not all white people are bad. So we're not sitting here saying that.
Of course not.
Okay, and not all black people are good either.
Of course not.
Okay, so we're not making that blanket statement.
We wouldn't do that.
But there seems to be a unwritten rule for white people, and especially white males, and we've defined it as white supremacy. But not many people understand what white supremacy really is. Can you share something with us? How do we qualify and categorize and be able to identify white supremacy?
Well, it's very simple. I've been dealing with that in a knowledge basis for 60 years. From the time when I was a young boy, I used to deal around with white folks and play with them and all that kind of thing. And they were always told by their parents that you play with those little blank blanks until a certain time. And then when you get a certain age, you get away from them. And then you are going to be a man or you're going to be a woman. And they will have to call you Mr. and Mrs. And that happened to me and my brothers and our playmates. And it happened to blacks throughout America and in the Caribbean and other areas. After a certain age, 9 to 13, you were not considered a friend of your childhood white playmates after those years. It all depends on where you were. Now, if you were in an area where there were only 1 or 2 whites, and their dad, for instance, owned the plantation of 20,000 acres and had 200 or 300 blacks on it, now they might be so-called friends until he turned 14 or 15. But when he turned 18, and his daddy and mama put him in that store, in that business where he was the manager, you were then Mr. John, Miss Ann, or whatever your name. Now that is a historical fact, and I just want somebody to call me and tell me to give a disclaimer and prove to me that I'm wrong.
Well, I know you're not wrong. We were actually beaten and bruised and murdered for even whistling at Miss Ann. And blacks at a certain time in our history couldn't even walk down the sidewalk. When they walked down the sidewalk and they met Mr. John, they knew, they weren't even instructed, they knew to get off the sidewalk and let them pass by. And so I know you're not wrong, but I don't understand why did whites institute that policy. It couldn't be just from hatred. It's why would you treat another race that way?
Well, it's usually, ill treatment usually is derived from two different things. One is economics, and the other is guilt and self-fulfillment and enhancement. White folks have always said, once I crawl out of these caves in Europe, in Northern Europe, places like that, I'm going to go out and dominate. They're like Coach Prime, the former football coach at Jackson State University. He has a slogan, I believe, we believe, we're going to dominate. We're going to turn over everything in our path if we can. And if we can't, we're sure going to try to. And that's the European thesis worldwide. And they have proved it in Africa, Asia, Latin America, in North America, even at the North Pole.
Does that include tactics so horrible as to kill and abuse people and discriminate against them?
Well, that's the way you get what I call lasting effect. If you want to show that you're dominant, you have to go in with the big stick. You have to shoot, kill, whip, burn, assassinate, do anything you want in order to show that you are dominant. But at the same time, you have to make sure the people you're whipping up on don't have the resources you have, so they won't give you any of it. You say you can't have guns, you can't have knives, you can't even have a brick. You cannot even be in a group of your own relatives in public, so you can talk about how you're going to defend yourself.
Doc, I know you're telling the truth. I was on the corner in Canton, Mississippi back in 1965, and there were a group of black boys standing there, and the sheriff drove up and said, disperse. I don't want to see 4 or more blacks together at any point, and made us disband.
Of course.
And it was rough back there, Doc. I recall when black men, when they had to leave the projects, they couldn't even return to their houses during the day, to their own home, because white folks dominated the black communities during the day. And they had their way with black women.
That's a fact.
And they had their way with them at any time they wanted to, and the black man was instructed not to return to that house during the day.
And you better not have a situation like that where they had, children by those ladies. They were strong then. I know of cases in Hinds County where the lady would be told, you better not ever have any kind of conversation with a black man.
A black woman was told that.
That's right. You better not. If you do, I got some special treatment for you. And I'm going to tell you right now, your kids, which would be his kids, are not going to the public school. They will put those kids in private cars and go to the nearest town where they had a black private school or Catholic school and put them in there. They didn't go to the public school in most cases.
Now, Doc, you're talking about one denying his own offspring.
That's a fact.
His own offspring had to submit to any white man of any class and status and call him Mr.
That's a fact.
Even though his daddy was white.
That's right. He would call his daddy's son Mr. He was not his brother.
Which was in fact his brother.
His half brother.
His half brother.
That's right.
But he had to call his half brother
Mr. whatever it was. I know of a lot of instances like that when I was coming along. I had relatives, distant relatives like that. I told you at least 5 other times when I was younger in a certain county that we'll go and visit our relatives who were white, and they will be so nice to us. When we were young and go by ourselves, we didn't know not to go to the front door. We'd go to the front door and knock on the door, or had a little clapper on that clapper, and some of them had doorbells. You hit on that doorbell, they'll come to the front door, laugh, and come on in. But you come on to the back, boys. Come on around to the back and come on in. Had to go to the back. Get in the kitchen. Oh, they were nice and friendly. And you would see that black lady that you know, and it might be your own relatives, cook it back up in there, and they would have some food for you, put it on a little old short table in the kitchen, and sit there, chat with you. But you couldn't go in that living room.
Couldn't go in the living room. Doc, we're up against the commercial break, but I want to tell our viewers out there that we're going to keep teaching the history. We're going to keep chronicling the incidents, and we want to define what white supremacy really is. I think that Dr. Henderson has done a great job of identifying white supremacy, what it looked like then and what it looks like today. He spoke of the fact that now it's more about economics than it is, or whether or not you're going to have to call someone Mr. or Mrs. or got to get off the sidewalk and things of that nature. But you're still deprived in a more mean way than even then before. Because back then you did have shelter and clothing and food to eat, and you had full employment. And so you didn't have to worry about those things. Today we find ourselves in a different situation. We're going to talk about that when we come back. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this commercial.
Hey, have you heard about the Accountable Card? It's more than a card. It's a complete mobile banking service that's accountable to all of us. You'll get a no credit check debit card good anywhere Visa is accepted to make purchases, deposits, even get or transfer cash. FDIC insured bank account managed from our smartphone app. There's even a pre-approved no-interest line of credit if you need emergency cash. So why go to the bank when you can have ours in your pocket? Get accountable. Just download our app today.
Are you dreaming of becoming an entrepreneur, but you're not sure where or how to start? At Entrepreneurs Academy 101, our online program will guide you step by step on how to start and grow your own business. We offer courses such as how to write a business plan, how to create a budget, and so much more. Our online training program is designed for you to learn at your own pace, and there's no set order to complete this program. Because our academy is online, you have the choice to learn with a group, with friends, or individually. Upon completion of the entire curriculum, you will receive a certificate of achievement to acknowledge that you have completed the training needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So enroll today to design the life that you love. Contact your entrepreneur coach, Brenda Myers, at 601-672-0695 or visit our website at www.entrepreneursacademy101.com for more information.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, as I said, in the heart of the Deep South. Mississippi, a state that Martin Luther King described as sweltering with injustice. And he hoped that one day that freedom would reign from every molehill and every mountainside throughout this entire world. That freedom has not reigned. It is not scheduled to. The fat lady is approaching the stage. She's about to sing and to declare that black people are on the verge of extermination, becoming distinct, the losing of the entire race and species. I know that sounds harsh, but you got to think about the possibilities. You got to think about what you're really up against, because, you know, the mighty leopard was once a dominant animal in the forest. You can't hardly find one anymore. What happened to that species? We're losing species every day in the animal world. No more tigers, no more elephants, no more buffaloes. You know, last time you saw a buffalo, you probably never seen one in your life. So don't think that it can't happen to a human race, that the whole race can become extinct. And so we're going to deal with these things and these issues because it's critically important in terms of developing a strategy and a plan to circumvent what we think is on the horizon. Now, Dr. Henderson, we talked about this white supremacy, and we talked about the white man's desire to dominate everything in the world, and I think domination is part of nature. I think that the strongest lion dominates the pack. The strongest eagle dominates the pack. That being strong means that you dominate, and we talked about that. And so for white folk to want to dominate is natural for them.
And it's natural for any human being.
I don't know about that, but go ahead, explain.
It's natural because that's what human beings do until they have been what I call changed through various forces. See,
Changed through various forces.
You can be a strong tiger or a strong lion or a big strong elephant, but if you whip him down, tie him down, dilute his desire to be strong and teach him that he is weak. You know from your elementary school that you can get an elephant that can pull a bulldozer. Tie him to a stick for 24 hours with a double piece of thread and take him loose the next day and he won't move. He would think that he's still tied to that stick.
He won't move.
He'd been beaten down. Psychologically, he'd been confused because he found himself becoming weak. He found that he was disturbed. When he pulled that little string, he felt a force that kept him connected.
An elephant.
That's right. And he didn't even tear loose from it.
Now, Doc.
Because that was not part of his culture.
Now, Doc, black folk wanted to dominate too. We ruled the beginning of civilization. Civilization began in Africa on the banks of the Nile. Dark-skinned people ruled. We go as far as to say that the Garden of Eden is in Africa. You know, nobody questions that. And so, how did a black man so dominant, so strong, become so docile and so sheep-like in America?
Well, because for years I've been telling you, Mr. Socrates, that's easy. I could get someone right now that you found somewhere, I'll say in Georgia, that just moved from Germany, from a royal family that has a 4-year college degree in any subject, that has been dominant in his family for 500 or 600 years. And I could get that person, bring him to Mississippi, take him down to some area down in Canton, Mississippi, and in 6 months, I would have this young person in a position where they're afraid to speak German, where they will be afraid to eat their own food, where they'll be afraid to look into my eyes because of fear, because I will create a new man in 6 months.
Now, black folk had you brought that point out. I remember that black folk couldn't look white folk in the eyes.
That's a fact.
They couldn't do that. They could not, they had to hold their head down. They couldn't look a man in the eye.
They couldn't smile in their presence. I was reading last night about that. There were 75 different things that you couldn't do to a white person. For instance, if they had a parade down the street, you couldn't stand by one and point at the figure that was in the parade.
You couldn't even point at it.
You couldn't point at it. You couldn't laugh. You couldn't cough.
Doc, having experienced that, how do you overcome and build a strong family and build a strong race? How do you implement plans and strategies that build you back to the person that you originally were. Can you do that?
Yeah,
through,
you can. You can do it now.
Can you do it through integration?
Well, no, you can't do anything through integration, but determine your destiny in a negative way. That's the last thing you want to do is practice integration. But black men were able to get a little what I call control after many hours of hard work. When they would go home, they were kings. They would make the rules. The wives were dominant at home while they were gone. They raised the children. But when Dad walked in, things changed. He was dominant. He had just gotten whipped verbally, overworked, underpaid for the last 8 hours. And he would come home and change within minutes. His wife knew that he was her husband, the father of his children. He was dominant. When he spoke, they listened, the kids and the wives. And then the Europeans said about 100 years later, these black men are too strong.
Too strong.
So these women got to be in charge from now on. So we used to have them trained well, but Reconstruction messed them up. And now these black folks think they can be in the Senate. They can be governors. They can be in the legislature. They can be presidents of companies. They can work for the federal and state governments in leadership positions. We got to sabotage this. We can't have but just a few. The others are going to have to go by the wayside.
Now, Doc, black people did demonstrate that they could build and control and create an economy. We always talk about Black Wall Street, etc., and we know that got burned down, etc., and the mind got control. So we know that we have done some things to demonstrate that we can rebuild ourselves, but we seem to have a host of problems, goal of self-determination. And those, you hand me a list of black problems that create the environment that causes the black man to fail. Let's talk about that.
Well, now this is real research in that. I don't want to say real research, but it's a fact. We have researched certain things for 50 years in the various jobs I've had throughout the years, from the national on down to local government and agencies and institutions. And according to my information, there are 6 things that have destroyed the black people in the world. Not only in
Mississippi,
including Mississippi,
but the world.
in the South, in the nation, in the world. And when people hear this, they are not going to believe it. But when they do the research, they will believe it, and they can say, you know, one thing, I'm guilty of this. I didn't expect to hear anything from a crazy man and believe it. And here are the factors that have ruined black folks. The first one is integration. The second one is miseducation. The third one is group distrust. The fourth one is self-hatred. The fifth one is self-destruction. And the last one is too much consumerism. We call it too consumeristic. That's killing black folks, have always killed us. And today, with this new plan that these Europeans have made in America and throughout the world, is worse than this, because they are getting ready now to dislocate and relocate black people again, and this time they're going to be dislocating and relocating black folks and other people of color, including their poor white folks, their poor white distant relatives.
Now, Doc, I'm listening at you and these 6 points that you're making. Integration, I get that integration is one of those things that our forefathers thought would be good for their children, not realizing that it broke the foundation, the fabric of the family down, and we sent our children to be taught by people that didn't have their best interests at heart.
Now, if you think that's good, or you let somebody that hate you teach you, you talk to any Native American, that sent his child to the government school. You talk to any poor white person that sent their children to live at a Catholic institution in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s and before, and see how they turned out.
Wow.
You will be ruined if you send your child to a place where he is not respected as a human being. They're going to change his culture, going to change his speech. They're going to change his appearance, and as much as they can change it, but they can't change it, they're going to teach him where he hates himself.
Doc, now that's another point that you made called self-hatred.
That's right.
And you're saying that he was taught to hate himself?
That's right. Those blacks, those Catholics, poor Catholics, and those poor Native Americans in America, in Canada and other places, that were taken from home when they were children, 5 and 6 years of age, and they would be away 5 or 6 years. They were taught to speak English, for instance. They were taught to pull that hair off and cut it. They were taught to wear European clothing. And here they are going back home, didn't even know their name, didn't know their appearance, were not familiar with their culture. And if you would turn one loose, he would starve to death. But if he was in that same environment, those 5 or 6 years he was at this so-called European school, you can turn him loose in cold weather of 5 degrees, give him a stick of stone, and in 2 hours he'll be dragging a buffalo or a bison back home to take the skin and have food and everything else he needs, and they'll have protection. So you get that same one that was educated at the European school, he'll starve to death.
Starve to death. Now, Doc, let's deal with that for a minute. Self-hatred. Now, you said we were taught to hate ourselves.
That's right.
And the studies show that.
Of
that
course.
when they were given, the black kids were given the choice of a black doll or a white doll, they chose the white doll.
Every time.
We get that. Why are we, though, today, not recognizing that what we're doing is a product of being taught to hate ourselves? And why do we want to be white? Why is it, Doc, that our women are wearing all this European hair? The biggest industry in the world right now, one of them anyway, is hair. And our women got hair down to their butt and below, and they got all of this stuff that represents somebody else's culture.
Well, you have to look in the magazines, the newspaper, look at television, look at TikTok, look at anything you want to look at. And during the early days, who did you see? You didn't see any black models. And every time you saw one, every now and then, she would have to be prevailing herself in those same characteristics. She was looking different. Up until a few years ago, where you would have a black model, for instance, that had natural hair, that had black skin, that had freckles. Otherwise, they couldn't even work in the bathroom to take care of the models in those areas. Now you have a few that's marching out there with a lot of positive self-concept. But prior to a few years ago, you just didn't see that.
Well,
you want to be like the people that tell you that, look, at me, I am supreme, I'm the best. I have all the good characteristics. Be like me, and I will help 2 or 3 of you be like me in real life. I'll allow you to live in my community. I'll let you make some money, but you better not make too much. If you do, I'm going to take it. I'm going to find out a way to take it. And that's what you're supposed to do if you want to be dominant. You have to whip the others down to the point where you take their resources, and those that don't have anything to take, you have to whip them down so until their self-esteem would be nothing, where they wouldn't even want to do anything with $2 million, but give it back to the people.
Give it back.
That's why I cannot understand why Europeans throughout the world don't want to get more richer than they are by giving reparation to black folks in cash. Boy, that'd be the greatest thing ever happened to the white race in the world.
Why is that?
If they would give monetary reparations to individual blacks, in 3 weeks, they will have 99% of that money back. But if they give reparations in the form of scholarships and in the form of institutional funds for communities that have been eradicated due to racism, where they burned the town down 10 or 15 years ago, or 30 years ago, burned down 10 churches in one community. They give them maybe $50 million to build 5 churches and set up institutional training centers in those churches outside of the public schools. That'll be positive. That would never happen in America.
But if they gave us cash,
They will have it. They had 98% of it in 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
And more European Americans be rich again. And I just can't see why they won't do it.
Why they won't do it? Instead of bombing Ukraine, they could, of course, we create wars because we want to make money.
For the top crust.
For the top crust.
The population, yes.
It has nothing to do with blacks in Jackson.
Oh, they care nothing about blacks when it comes to war, other than put them in war so they can fight them. I'm a good example of that. You don't let no black man do anything in war but go there to fight and serve you so he or she can die. And those few that don't get killed, they get messed up mentally. And the 2 or 3 that can be mentally messed up and escape that and still survive as normal, people want to know why they're acting like that. That boy is supposed to be crazy.
Now, Doc, this theory that you got here, and I don't know if it's a theory or a fact.
It's a fact.
Okay.
I don't talk nothing but facts, Mr. Socrates. Where you get that from?
Okay. This fact that you have, that if you gave the money to black folks, they'd have it back and it would boost their economy and they could buy bigger houses and more boats and more land, and blacks would be poorer and poorer after reparation than they began.
Of course.
That's a fact.
It's a fact.
Okay.
I've seen it happen.
Okay. So now, that lends into this point that you made about too consumeristic. I never heard that word.
Well, that's not a new word. It's just not used very much. And most people don't want to talk about it. They're embarrassed and shamed to talk about it.
So we would take the reparation money and we would employ this term consumeristic.
That's right.
And we'd buy all of the hair.
All the big houses, all the jewelry, all the whiskey, some of the best whiskey around. We'll go on.
Black folk don't drink cheap whiskey.
That's right. We'll go on vacations to Europe. We'll bypass Africa. We'll go on into the islands and rent a whole island instead of the hotel, the whole island. We'll call the biggest rap star in America or in the world and pay him $10 million to come over and do a few drunken bombs with, that singing and gyrations they do with a little old team behind them, and pay them that $10 million for that, and come back home, and then
won't go to the black-owned gas station.
That's right. Won't even go and buy them a brand new mansion and pay for it cash. Will not go and buy them a brand new car and pay for it cash. They lease the thing or rent it.
Now, when we come back, we got to go to a commercial break, but when we come back, blacks tend to want to move out to wherever white folk go.
But I'm going to tell you when you come back how bad that is. That's a bad deal, Mr. Socrates.
We're going to a commercial break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Socrates Garrett ENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.Dot grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the Deep South. Mississippi, a state with less than 3 million people, which 40+% of those individuals are African American. Yet we're the poorest state in the nation. We have some sections of Mississippi that no man has ever seen. We only have 3 million people, as I said. And so there's opportunity here, but we have failed leadership, and the failed leadership keeps us last. We're last in health care in Mississippi. Infant mortality, we're last in that. We're the poorest state in the nation. We have more people incarcerated and locked up than any place else in the world, including third world countries. And so you have to ask yourself, why is that? And so we deal with that and we struggle with that every day. In Mississippi, we probably have the highest number of mulattoes than anywhere else in the country. That's because during the slavery time, when Doc Henderson says there were more African Americans in Mississippi than there were Europeans. He says that slavery could have been defeated in 90 days if we had come together. But we learned in our two segments before, that there were some things happening that didn't allow that to work. One of those was self-hatred and group distrust. So if you don't trust your group and you hate your group, then you cannot build the type of cohesiveness that's required to mount a war or to take on your enemy in a strategic way. It's too much friendly fire. Those of you that have been in the Army understand what I mean by friendly fire. That's when you're being shot at and killed by people in your own army. And so we have that in Mississippi, in the black community. So much distrust, so much self-hatred, so much friendly fire, until we're unable to mount any progress in terms of our condition. Now, many of you have watched Jackson, Mississippi on the news over the last 2 or 3 years with the water crisis, with the water sewer crisis, with high crime rates, with a defunct police department, with a new police department that the governor put in place with House Bill 1020, where now whites have their own police department, their own chief, and have their own judges, and they can do whatever they want to do. And those of us in Mississippi know our place. And so we know we want to survive, and we want to mingle in. We want to hide out amongst white folks. Maybe they won't notice that we're black. And so we find ourselves doing that. Now, Dr. Henderson says there's an issue here with something called gentrification that's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm not exactly sure where he's going with that, but let's deal with it for a moment. Doc, you're saying, and you have depicted here on this paper, a plan that white folk have put in place to dislodge and reclaim Jackson, Mississippi from its 85% black population.
That's a fact.
How does that happen?
But let's go and give a little more inclusive information. Not only is this happening in Jackson, Mississippi, it's happening all over the South, all over America, and the world, where there is a majority of black folks. Black folks or people of color. See, there's a little difference there. Black people or people of color. And when I'm talking about people of color, I'm talking those people with that extra dark hue, no matter whether it's Hispanic or an Asian. If they are real dark or black, they are not considered white in European society.
If you had a black Caucasian, he would be black?
A black, is what?
Caucasian.
If
a black white person, would he be black?
If he was black in color, if he was more black than white, he would be considered black.
He would be treated
as a black person if it was known. If he had white complexion, talked and acted like a black person, he would be considered black.
What about this rule, one drop? You know, if you have one drop of African American blood in your DNA, that you are black. How does
That's a lot of fictitious propaganda. Hell,
Okay.
most of the white folks I know got more than one drop of black blood in them. So that would, about 95% of white folks, if they would get a DNA test, they have at least from 2 to 10% of African origin.
Hold on. Now you want me to believe that white folk have black blood.
Most of them.
Most of them.
That's right.
But they hate black people.
They're supposed to hate them. They were taught that. You're supposed to carry on your homegrown characteristics up until you can learn better. But if you are not going to be in a situation where you can learn better, you are usually going to promote the same thing you were taught to your children, to your grandchildren. You're born a Democrat. If you stay around Democrats all your life, that's what you're going to be. You're born a Bible-toting Baptist person, you're going to be a Bible-toting Baptist until you die, unless you move out into an arena where you run into a lot of other religious denominations. That is a fact.
So let's get to this gentrification plan. How does that work?
It's very simple. Everyone knows that if you want something, there are several ways to get it. One is you go and ask for it. The second thing to do to get something you want is to go and buy it. The third way to get it is to go and take it. Then, if I say, Mr. Socrates, I don't want you to take my property. You can't do that. You say, yes, I can. I say, well, Mr. Socrates, we have a fight. We have a fight. And here I am fighting you with the weapons I have that you have trained me not to have the kind you have, and you want to fight because you're going to destroy me within days or minutes.
Wow.
And take my property, take my resources, take my family, take whatever I have. And then you're going to teach me that I am supreme. And then you're going to relocate me. You're going to put me to the point where I'm not going to have the power to vote, to make a decision. I'm not going to be able to even live in my own town because you're going to take my property. You're going to charge high rents. You're going to tear down my neighborhood and put other neighborhoods there that's tied up to a transportation system, a fast bullet train. You're going to have other services there, good utilities, good private schools, good charter schools. When I get ready to look around to get back into my old home neighborhood, I was a homeowner. All I had to do is pay taxes. I paid for that home in the last 30 years, paid for. I go back, I can't even find that home. It's gone. Don't even have the money to live in one of those apartments where my home used to be because it costs $1,500, $1,800, $2,300 a month plus utilities, and I was living in my home for $600 a month, and that included utilities that you took from me by law. You said I had to leave. You had 30 days, and then you didn't even have enough respect for me as a human being to find a place for me to go. In those 30 days, you said you get out. And I would go and tell you, give me another 2 weeks. Say, man, I've been looking all over the area. I can't find anywhere. Say, you're not going to get 2 weeks. What does this paper say? You have to be out by midnight on the 30th. The day is the 30th. You go back home that morning. Before day, you're not going to go. That's the sheriff. He's going to come in and take your stuff out, throw you out, and put your stuff on the street, and probably take you to jail for trespassing on your own property.
On your own property.
That's right, because you're supposed to have been out at midnight, and it's 6 a.m. now. You own somebody else's property now.
I'm on somebody else's property.
That happens every day.
Every day.
Somewhere in America, somewhere in Asia, somewhere in Africa, somewhere in India, somewhere in Europe, for black people and people of color, and poor whites.
Now, if it happens to poor whites, why don't poor whites join together with blacks?
Well, they've tried to do that in a few times in the history of the world, and it never worked because they were categorized as nigger lovers, and they were categorized as one that didn't want to accept the fact that they were white and that you are disgraced to even associate with those kind of folks. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You know you're white. Get away from those folks. And you would tell them, man, we all had the same problem down here. Well, you're still white. I don't care how bad your situation is. You're better than them black folks. Get away from it. And if you get back with them, you're going to be hanged. You're going to be burned out. You're going to be killed. You're going to be put in jail. They'll find some way to mess over.
It's a serious issue.
That's a fact.
Now, Doc, so we got almost an insurmountable challenge to lift up the black race and rebuild its self-esteem and give it back its identity. Now, of the 6 points that you made that were keeping us, I want to run through those real quick so that our audience will know. You say that the black problem consists of integration.
Correct.
Because we allowed our enemy to teach our children.
That's a fact. And to hate us by not saying hate yourself, it's saying if you're not like me, you're not right.
And so it's something wrong with who I am.
That's right.
So
you don't want to be wrong. You want to be right like you've been taught to be right.
And so I want to act like you.
Of course.
Wow.
That's
and
right.
then you say miseducation.
That's right.
That's got to do with who you really are? And
No, that has to do with how you are taught before and during the period you're in school. If I want to get you miseducated, I will control your educational process. I will give you the materials I want you to read. I will give you the kind of teachers that I want to teach you the proper way, which is the way I want them to teach you. I will underfund your schools. I will undereducate your teachers. I will make sure that you don't have proper facilities at your school, like a bathroom, like a cafeteria, like a gym, like a microscope. You're not going to have that. You're not going to have good transportation to get to school. You're going to have to walk or ride a horse. And if you don't have a horse, you're going to have to get on a slide. But you ain't going to ride that bus that my kids ride, because we're going to pass you every day. You can't be eating with us, boy. You might go to school with me and learn something. That's not going to happen.
So it's rough out here. It's rough out here.
And we allow it to happen, Doc. We allow that to happen.
And we're allowing it to happen today.
Of course.
It's got slightly a different form sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just as in your face as it ever was.
Exactly.
And so we ran through those points: group distrust, self-hatred, self-destruction, and too consumeristic.
That's a fact.
Those are the black problems that we got to deal with.
And if we would deal with those problems and put a plan together, which there are a lot of plans out there, and look at 5 areas of activity that I've been talking about and dominate those and control those areas from birth to death, we wouldn't have these problems, because the same people that want us to stay in the situation we're in would then pretend that they love us and come back to us and say, I'm your friend, so they can see how they can maneuver you and take what you got again. And it's happening all over the world right now. And that's why we call it relocation, gentrification, and many other words.
So there's one topic here that you didn't put in your 6, and I made a note to myself: religion.
Well, that topic is so strong, it's got to be by itself. Man, that's toxic. When you start talking about religion, that supersedes these 6 that I mentioned.
Oh.
That has been the most detrimental thing that ever happened to so-called black people in the world. The European religion, man, that is like taking dope.
Doc,
That is like being opiated.
Doc, we all as black people, not all, but 98% of us believe in God.
Which is nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
Nothing wrong with that. There is a God of mankind, but it's most certainly not Jesus Christ. It's most certainly not the Pope. Don't nobody know who God is. God is who you are told he is by the people that created God in their mind, in their imagination, and gave him a name, and say these are the characteristics of God. This is what he does. He is supreme. He knows all.
Well, God,
Because that's me.
we believe, no, not because that's me.
No, that's
we believe,
Okay.
black people, if I can speak for them for a moment,
Big for him.
we believe that God created the universe, created the heavens and the earth, put the cosmic systems together, the seasons, everything. That is a magnificent creation that no man could have possibly have done.
Of course, I agree with that.
Okay, so we believe there is a God that is stronger than any man in the world.
But that's a different thing. That is what I call a supernatural being. Man don't know whether it is, most certainly wasn't a so-called man. Don't nobody know who did that. They haven't been able to figure out who made the universe yet. These scientists are coming up with something every day, sending all kinds of equipment up in space to the moon, to Mars, and everywhere trying to figure this thing out. So anything you don't know, Mr. Socrates, you have to give it a name. You have to identify and call it something until you figure out what the real name is. So you call it a God. You call it Jesus Christ. You call it the Pope. You call it anything you want when you don't know what it really is.
You call it Buddha.
Anything you want to call it. Because you don't know what it is. You don't know where man came from. You don't know who created the universe. Who put the moon in the circuits.
Somebody had to do it.
Not necessarily somebody. The cosmos was probably created by a lot of chemicals and other ingredients that got mixed together and collided in some way that caused a chemical change, and eventually throughout the centuries, not hundreds of years, not since Christ's time, that generated some kind of life that evolved into other life, and some went in one direction, some went in another, and eventually man was created. Jesus surely didn't create man. Jesus Christ
Well,
did.
Darwin had a theory about how that happened.
Oh, he's just a European that was coming up with some propaganda. That was his life to go. He had a little education, and he had enough money to travel around and play around with plants and stuff and travel with the European colonialists in various places. He was getting a free ride, so he didn't have no need for money. He was rich, or had rich benefactors, and he was studying plants while they were over there looking for gold and stuff. So he had to come up with something to get the next ride back to another country. That's good sense. That's always smart.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Help us, Jesus. Now, let's get back to gentrification. Jackson is 85% black. The white folk have left. Where did they go, and what is their plan?
Well, the plan is, first of all, I'm answer and verify that you're correct, about 85% black.
That's the
Plus one or
statistics
two.
I heard.
That's
yeah.
right, plus one or two. Where did black folks go? First of all, they went out of Jackson. Therefore, they went far away from Jackson.
The white folk.
Yeah.
Where did the white folk go?
Yes, so they could see Jackson. They went to Brandon, Pearl, Madison, right around Jackson, so they could keep their eyes on it, because that's where a lot of their jobs were. That's where the government facilities were and are in most cases. They said, well, the black folks here get too populated in Jackson. They have too many educational institutions in the Jackson area. The Negroes getting a little education. They think they're supposed to be in politics. And They outnumbering us now because they are moving from the Delta, from the coast, from North Mississippi, moving to Jackson, attending school at certain universities. And they're not leaving. They're not going back to the Delta. So they stayed and started getting jobs in some of the factories, started getting jobs in low-level government. And then they started politicking and got to vote. And then you had people like Henry Kirksey and many others start talking about the fact that black folks ought to vote in blocks as a unit for their own kind. And they messed around and listened to some of those folks and started doing that. They started voting, and then you got a black on a little city council somewhere, a black alderman somewhere. You got a black on a school board in the late 1960s or early 1970s. And as the years pass, you got a majority in this council or this group. And then they messed around, and some of the same people, Henry Kirksey and others, say, you know, it's time now to get that top job. And a few blacks will run for mayor here or there. And of course, they would lose the first time, and in some areas the second time. But eventually they got to be a mayor here and there. And then they had these at-large council seats. And the white man would run, and he would win. Because all of them were running at large. You didn't have districts. And then them same black folks said, look, we can't have these open districts like that. We got to have a ward system. So in the black community, we have to draw a circle around the black district and say this is District 1, so we can have a chance of getting representation. And white folks said, no, can't do that. And they got with the NAACP, the Urban League, and others, and they went to court and say this has to stand. Black folks have a right to represent themselves where they're in the majority. And they will let that happen. And that's the way you got to have blacks heading school boards, some towns, some cities. And white folks said, that is against my teaching. We can't have no blacks make a decision on my tax money. We're not going to be going to school with those black folks. We've got them messed up in the mind already. We done miseducated them. They don't know how to do anything because we taught them that way. They don't know nothing about leadership. They are not good leaders. We didn't teach them to plan, to be good leaders, to be business people. We taught them to work for us. And we're not going to tolerate it. We're leaving Dodge.
The whole point right there. We're out of time. We're going to come back and we're going to deal with this because Dr. Henderson said, white folks said after black folks gained political power, and especially the top job, the mayor, in 1995 in Jackson, Mississippi, it began the great migration out of Jackson by white folk. He said they got out of Dodge. We're going to deal with this when we come back, and so we want you to make sure you join us next week as we continue to lecture and teach and gain some insight and understanding about what's going on in the African American community. Dr. Henderson, where can people reach you? Where can they find you? What do you got? What you got going on here in the next week or so?
Well, the next week or so, we're going to be talking to a group of bankers in central Mississippi. I'm also going to be at a certain school talking to a little small group about career education and not putting emphasis on getting a 4-year college degree. That's not going to do you any good. I'm going to talk to those young people about getting in high-tech, vocational and technical programs initially where they can get out of school in 9 to 18 months and make $40 or $50 an hour, and then go to a senior college full or part-time after they start working, so they won't have to get a loan. And then I'm going to another group. It's going to be an online group where there will be people paying that's going to come from anywhere they want to come from. They might be some from different countries, and I will be talking about economic development and how the new religion ought to conform itself or configure itself where it can dominate in areas where black people are in control and not do what we just told you. Want to leave the black community, go where you can't even afford to go, or buy one of these old rundown churches in your community that others left you, and it's going to cost more to maintain it than a new one would cost you. That's what I'll be talking about. That's 4 appointments right there.
How can people contact you?
It's 601, ladies and gentlemen, 201-1957. And if you want to email us at clu369@gmail.com. That's clu369@gmail.com. Or you can check us out at www.actionleadershipinstitute.org, and you can see what we do. Or you can go in and do www.webelievedigital.com/Eldridge Henderson/Socrates Garrett, and you can see what we've been talking about for some time. And folks, if you want to hear the non-radio or television version of how to survive and change your life and status in 30 to 69 days, call us. We have a speakers group, and we have talked to you about those areas of activity that you need to control from birth to death, plus 200 other topics that's related to those 5 areas of activity.
Doc, it's always good. We appreciate you joining us. Remember, if you're on Facebook, share this program with your friends and family. Send us stars. If you're on YouTube, go on and subscribe to this program. You know it's critically important that we get this information out. We need your help that way. If you're on WeBelieveDigital.com, we want you to share this program and hit the donate button. And I think we're having some difficulty with the donate button there. And so we're going to take a look at that and see if we can get more contributions coming into us in that way. If you want Dr. Henderson and I to come and share this program, we're looking forward to syndicating this program throughout black media across the country. This information has to get out. And so if you want that, then you reach out to us at 800-492-5186. Email us at webelieveplatforms@gmail.com. Until next week, stay safe and good night.
Looking for the hottest content in the city of Jackson and surrounding areas? Check out WeBelieveDigital.com. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We Believe Digital Podcast is here for all your podcasting needs.